My ex-wife traded me 4 artist friends, but when I found a new girlfriend, Kate wanted to come back to me because things didn't work out with someone else. I still remember the day I met Kate. I was 23, a junior at university, still trying to figure out what I wanted from life. She was 21, a sophomore, and walked into the same study group I'd just joined. The first thing that caught my eye was her laugh, light, effortless, like she didn't have a care in the world. She was magnetic. We clicked almost immediately, sharing jokes, stories, and an embarrassing number of memes in our first few conversations. Kate was smart, smarter than me, honestly, and had a knack for making everyone around her feel important. She loved art and could talk for hours about obscure painters or the hidden meanings in Renaissance works. She even convinced me to go to an art exhibit once, though I spent most of the time pretending to understand what I was looking at. By the time finals rolled around that semester, we were spending all our time together. We weren't officially dating yet, but the chemistry was undeniable. I'd walk her home after late-night library sessions, and we'd sit outside her dorm, talking about everything from our childhoods to our big dreams for the future. It was during one of those conversations that she told me something that, at the time, didn't seem like a big deal but would eventually change everything. We were sitting on the steps of her dorm, the air cool and crisp as fall turned to winter. Kate was playing with the edges of her scarf, avoiding my gaze. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice soft but serious. "Okay," I said, leaning closer, trying to read her expression. "What's up?" "I made a promise to my dad," she began, "a long time ago, and it's kind of important to me." She paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. I waited, not wanting to push her. Finally, she continued, "I promised him I'd wait until I was married. You know, for sex." I blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, okay." She rushed to explain, her words tumbling out in a nervous stream. "It's not because I'm super religious or anything. I'm not. My dad's a pastor, though, and it was really important to him. He made me promise when I was a teenager and, well, I guess it just stuck." I nodded, trying to process what she was telling me. It wasn't what I'd expected, but it wasn't a deal-breaker either. I liked Kate a lot, and if this was something that mattered to her, I was willing to respect it. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally. "I get it, and I'm okay with it." She looked relieved, a small smile breaking through her nervousness. "Really? Really?" I said, and at the time, I meant it. Over the next few months, our relationship deepened. Kate and I officially became a couple, and it felt like everything was falling into place. She met my friends, and they loved her. I met hers, and they made it clear I'd better not screw things up. We went on road trips, spent lazy Sundays watching movies in my tiny apartment, and celebrated every little milestone like it was the most important thing in the world. But the issue of intimacy lingered in the background. It wasn't like we didn't have any physical connection. There were plenty of kisses, hugs, and stolen moments, but there was always a line we couldn't cross. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Kate was worth waiting for. But as time went on, it started to feel like an invisible barrier between us. I didn't bring it up much, not wanting to pressure her or make her feel bad. But every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering how long we could keep going like this. And I couldn't help but notice the tension it created, even if neither of us said it out loud. The first real crack in our relationship came during a party at a mutual friend's place. It was a typical college scene. Cheap beer, loud music, and too many people crammed into a too small space. Kate and I had come together, but at some point during the night, she disappeared into the crowd. I found her an hour later, talking to a guy I didn't recognize. He was leaning in close, his body language way too familiar for my liking. Kate laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his arm. I felt a pang of jealousy, sharp and unexpected. I walked over, trying to play it cool. "Hey, Kate." She turned, her smile faltering for a split second before she recovered. "Jake, this is Connor. We were just talking about the art exhibit he's organizing." Connor looked me up and down, his expression unreadable. "Nice to meet you," he said, extending a hand. I shook it, forcing a smile. "You too." Kate seemed oblivious to the tension, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Later, When we were walking home, I brought it up. Who was that guy? She frowned, clearly confused. Connor? He's just a friend. Why? I hesitated, not wanting to start a fight. No reason. Just curious. She didn't push the issue, but the incident stayed with me. I couldn't tell if I was being paranoid or if there was something I wasn't seeing. Over time, little things started to add up. Kate would cancel plans at the last minute, saying she was busy with school or helping her dad with church events. She started spending more time with her art friends, and while I didn't mind her having her own life, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was pulling away from me. One night, I found myself scrolling through her Instagram, looking for clues. Most of her posts were harmless, pictures of her paintings, selfies with her friends, but there were a few that gave me pause. Like the one of her and Connor at a coffee shop, smiling like they were sharing some inside joke. Or the one of her at a gallery opening I hadn't even known she was attending. I knew I should talk to her about it, but every time I tried, I lost my nerve. I didn't want to come across as insecure or controlling, so I kept my doubts to myself, hoping things would go back to the way they used to be. Everything came to a head on our one-year anniversary. I'd planned a special evening, dinner at her favorite restaurant, followed by a surprise trip to the planetarium. I even got her a necklace with a tiny star pendant, a nod to her love of astronomy. When I showed up at her dorm to pick her up, she wasn't ready. In fact, she looked like she'd completely forgotten. "Oh, Jake," she said, her face falling. "I'm so sorry. I completely lost track of time." She was still in her sweats, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "I thought we were going out tonight," I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "We were," she said quickly. We are. Just give me a few minutes to get ready." I waited while she changed, but the evening felt ruined before it even began. At dinner, she was distracted, checking her phone every few minutes. By the time we got to the planetarium, I was struggling to hide my frustration. When I finally confronted her about it, she sighed, looking more tired than guilty. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said. "I've just got a lot on my mind right now." I never thought frustration could feel this heavy. When I first told myself I'd respect Kate's decision to wait until marriage for sex, I genuinely believed it wouldn't bother me. But as time went on, the tension grew. I'd lie awake at night, replaying our conversations about it in my head, telling myself I was a good boyfriend for understanding. I tried not to let my mind wander, but it's hard when you're young, in love, and in a relationship that feels half complete. The worst part was how it wasn't just about sex. It was what it represented. Kate seemed like she was building walls between us, and I couldn't figure out why. I wanted to feel closer to her, emotionally and physically, but every time I brought it up, carefully, so carefully, she'd brush it off. "It's not that I don't care about you, Jake," she'd say. "It's just important to me to wait. You understand that, right?" Of course, I'd nod and smile, swallowing the lump in my throat. But the truth was, I didn't understand. And the more time passed, the harder it became to keep pretending I did. By our final year at university, things had shifted even more. Kate had started hanging out with a new crowd, people from her art classes, mostly. They were older, cooler, and way more sophisticated than the friends we'd shared during our first few years. People like Connor, who was now a regular presence in her life. And then there were others, Olivia, a gallery curator who dressed like she walked off the cover of a fashion magazine. Marcus, a sculptor whose pieces sold for thousands of dollars. And Clara, a painter whose work was already being featured in major exhibits. I wasn't jealous of them, not exactly, but being around them made me feel small. They were all so driven, so sure of themselves, and it only highlighted how aimless I felt in comparison. Kate seemed to thrive in their company, her confidence growing with every conversation, every collaboration. I wanted to be happy for her, but instead, I felt like I was being left behind. One night, she invited me to one of their parties. I wasn't in the mood, but I knew better than to say no. We arrived at Marcus's loft, a sprawling, industrial space filled with eclectic furniture, dim lighting, and art on every wall. The place was packed with people, all of them effortlessly cool, holding glasses of wine and talking about things I couldn't even begin to follow. Kate disappeared into the crowd almost immediately, pulled away by Olivia, who wanted to introduce her to someone. I wandered around awkwardly, trying to find a corner where I wouldn't feel completely out of place. Eventually, I found myself by the snack table, nursing a lukewarm beer and pretending to be interested in a bowl of overpriced olives. That's when I met Chris. He was another boyfriend, someone dragged along by his girlfriend, who was apparently one of Marcus's many muses. Chris and I hit it off quickly, bonding over how out of place we both felt. He was a finance guy, just as clueless about the art world as I was, and we spent most of the evening joking about how everyone there looked like they belonged in a movie. At some point, I glanced across the room and saw Kate. She was deep in conversation with Marcus, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. He was leaning in close, hanging on her every word. I felt my stomach twist, jealousy flaring up despite myself. Chris followed my gaze and raised an eyebrow. That your girlfriend? Yeah, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. Looks like she's having a good time, he said, not unkindly. I didn't respond, taking a long sip of my beer instead. Later that night, when we got home, I brought it up. You seemed pretty cozy with Marcus. Kate frowned, clearly annoyed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said quickly, regretting it immediately. I don't know. You were talking to him a lot. He's a friend, Jake. And an important one, professionally. You know that. I know, I said, even though it didn't make me feel any better. It's just, I feel like you've been spending more time with them than with me lately. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Jake, this is my future. These people are part of the world I want to be in. I need to make connections, build relationships. You get that, don't you? I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure I did. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit it. Things only got worse from there. Kate started missing more of our plans, canceling last minute because of something important with her art friends. When we did spend time together, it felt strained, like we were both trying too hard to recapture something that was already gone. One night, we went out to dinner, a rare occasion, since Kate was usually too busy for anything that wasn't work-related. I tried to make the most of it, cracking jokes and reminiscing about the early days of our relationship, but she seemed distracted, her eyes flicking to her phone every few minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Kate, can we talk? She looked up, startled. About what? Us. I feel like we're drifting apart. Her expression softened, but there was a hint of frustration in her eyes. Jake, we're just in different places right now. I'm trying to focus on my career, and you're still figuring things out. That's okay, but it's hard to balance everything. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew she didn't mean it as an insult, but it felt like one anyway. So what are you saying? That I'm holding you back? No, she said quickly. I'm not saying that. I don't know. Maybe we need to take a step back, reevaluate things. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Are you breaking up with me? She hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. Maybe we should take a break, she said finally, just for a little while. See where things go. I nodded, too numb to argue. Okay. We didn't say much after that. I paid the bill, and we walked home in silence. When we got to her dorm, she hesitated at the door, like she wanted to say something. But whatever it was, she kept it to herself. Good night, Jake, she said softly before disappearing inside. I walked back to my apartment, the emptiness settling in with every step. I'd known this was coming, but that didn't make it hurt any less. For the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly alone. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the only one she gave me. 6 months after Kate and I broke up, my life had settled into a strange rhythm. I wasn't exactly thriving, but I wasn't falling apart either. I threw myself into my work and spent more time with my friends. Chris, the guy I'd met at Marcus's party, had become a surprisingly good friend. He'd gone through his own breakup a few months before mine, and we bonded over commiserating and joking about the absurdities of our situations. Life wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. Then Kate came back. It started with a text, completely out of the blue. I was sitting on my couch, mindlessly scrolling through Netflix, when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Kate. I hadn't heard from her since the night we ended things. For a long moment, I just stared at the notification, my stomach churning with a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. Finally, I opened the message. Hey Jake, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Can we talk? I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to delete the message and move on. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, got the better of me. After a few minutes of staring at my phone, I typed a short reply, sure. When? Her response came almost immediately. Are you free tomorrow? Coffee at that place by campus? The next day, I found myself sitting in a corner booth at our old coffee shop, nervously drumming my fingers on the table. The place hadn't changed. Same mismatched furniture, same faint smell of cinnamon and burnt espresso, but it felt different now. I felt different. When Kate walked in, my breath caught. She looked good, better than I remembered, even. Her hair was shorter, and she had this air of confidence about her that hadn't been there before. She spotted me and smiled, that same disarming smile that had drawn me in the first time we met. Hi, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Hi, I replied, my voice awkward and stiff. We made small talk for a while, catching up on the basics. She told me about her job at an art gallery, how she'd been working on a new series of paintings. I told her about my work, which felt dull and insignificant in comparison. But as the conversation went on, I started to feel a flicker of the connection we used to have. It was almost enough to make me forget why we'd broken up in the first place. Then she dropped the bombshell. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months, she said, her tone suddenly serious. About us. About what went wrong. I didn't say anything, letting her continue. I realized how much I miss you, she said, her eyes meeting mine. And I know I made mistakes, but I want to fix things. I want us to try again. I was caught completely off guard. I hadn't expected this, not even close. Kate, I don't know, I began, but she cut me off. I know what you're going to say. That things didn't work before. But I've changed, Jake. I mean it. I'm ready now. Ready for what? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. For everything, she said, her cheeks flushing slightly. I know it was hard for you before. I wasn't fair to you. But I'm ready to be with you, fully. If you still want me. It took me a moment to process what she was saying. You're saying you're ready for intimacy? She nodded, her gaze steady. Yes. Her words should have made me happy. They should have been everything I wanted to hear. But instead of relief, I felt a strange sense of unease. Something didn't add up. I decided to press her. What changed? Why now? She hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough to set off alarm bells in my head. I've just grown up a lot these past few months, she said. I've realized what I want, and it's you. Her answer felt rehearsed, but I didn't push it further. Instead, I told her I needed time to think. She looked disappointed but didn't argue, and we parted ways with a promise to talk again soon. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. Something about it didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Then, a few days later, I found out. It happened by accident. I was at a bar with Chris, venting about the whole situation, when he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Wait, Kate? Wasn't she dating that guy Trevor from her gallery? I froze. What? Trevor, he repeated. I met him at that gallery opening a couple months ago. They were definitely a thing. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Are you sure? Pretty sure, he said, frowning. Why? I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through Instagram, looking for Trevor. It didn't take long to find him. His profile was full of photos. Him at the gallery, him with friends, and then, unmistakably, him with Kate. There were pictures of them at events, at dinner, even on what looked like a romantic getaway. The most recent post was from 3 weeks ago, a candid shot of Kate laughing as Trevor kissed her on the cheek. The caption read, "The most amazing woman I've ever met." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The next time I saw Kate, I confronted her. I showed her the photos, my voice shaking with anger. You were with him, weren't you? She didn't deny it. Jake, Yes, I was. But it's over now. Over? I snapped. You were with him 3 weeks ago. It didn't mean anything, she said desperately. I thought I wanted something different, but I was wrong. I realized I still love you. Love me? I laughed bitterly. You lied to me, Kate. You didn't just move on. You made me the backup plan. That's not true, she said, tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake. I'm sorry, Jake. I'm so sorry. But her words felt hollow. The damage was done. I couldn't unsee the photos, couldn't unknow the truth. She'd made her choice, and it hadn't been me. I can't do this, I said finally, my voice breaking. I can't be with someone who treats me like this. She begged me to reconsider, but I was firm. It wasn't just about what she'd done. It was about what it said about us. About her. We weren't the same people we used to be, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. When she finally left, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I knew I'd made the right decision, but that didn't make it hurt any less. After everything that happened with Kate, I knew I needed a fresh start. The breakup, the betrayal, the months of second-guessing myself, it was all too much. I couldn't keep living in the same town, surrounded by the same memories. So, when I got an offer for a new job in a city a few hours away, I jumped on it without hesitation. The job wasn't glamorous, a mid-level marketing position at a tech startup, but it paid decently, and it was far enough from my old life to feel like a clean slate. I packed up my tiny apartment, said goodbye to my friends, and hit the road. Finding a place to live in the city wasn't easy. Rent was expensive, and most of the apartments I looked at were either out of my budget or complete dumps. Just when I was starting to lose hope, I came across an ad for a shared apartment in a decent neighborhood. The rent was reasonable, the photos looked good, and the guy renting the room, Mike, seemed normal enough when I met him for coffee to talk about it. He was a software engineer, a few years older than me, with a laid-back vibe that put me at ease. I moved in a week later, and for the first time in months, I started to feel like things might actually be okay. The apartment was nothing fancy, just a small two-bedroom with mismatched furniture and a perpetually leaky faucet in the kitchen, but it felt like home. Mike turned out to be a great roommate. He worked long hours and spent most of his free time gaming or hanging out with friends, so we didn't see each other much. But when we did, we got along well, bonding over late-night beers and terrible action movies. A few weeks after I moved in, Mike mentioned that his sister, Olivia, was coming to visit. She's crashing here for a couple of weeks, he said casually over dinner one night. Just giving you a heads up. Cool, I said, not thinking much of it. The day Olivia arrived, I came home from work to find her sitting on the couch, flipping through one of Mike's gaming magazines. She looked up as I walked in, and I immediately felt like an idiot for not mentally preparing myself. She was stunning. Long, dark hair that framed her face perfectly, warm brown eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. She stood up to introduce herself, and I tried not to stare like a complete idiot. Hi, I'm Olivia, she said, her voice bright and friendly. Jake, I managed, shaking her hand. Nice to meet you. She stayed with us for 2 weeks, and in that time, we got to know each other pretty well. Olivia was nothing like Kate. She was funny, down to earth, and had a way of making everyone around her feel comfortable. She was an elementary school teacher, passionate about her job, and had this infectious energy that made it impossible not to like her. We spent a lot of time together during those 2 weeks, mostly because Mike was either working late or out with friends. Olivia and I ended up watching movies, cooking dinner, or just talking for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her students, her love for hiking, and the road trip she was planning for the summer. I told her about my job, my friends, and, reluctantly, a little about my past with Kate. She listened without judgment, offering thoughtful advice and a kind smile that made me feel like I could actually move on. By the time her visit was over, I realized I didn't want her to leave. But I didn't want to make things awkward either. She was Mike's sister, after all. So, I kept my feelings to myself and focused on settling into my new life. A few days after she left, she texted me. It was something simple, a photo of a ridiculous meme we laughed about during her visit, but it opened the door to more conversations. We started texting every day, and before I knew it, we were talking on the phone at night. It felt easy, natural, and completely different from any relationship I'd had before. A month later, she came back to visit. This time, it wasn't just to see Mike. We spent the weekend exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and laughing until our sides hurt. By the end of the weekend, I couldn't hold back any longer. As we were walking back to the apartment after dinner, I turned to her and said, "Olivia, I really like you." She stopped, looking up at me with a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite read. "I like you too, Jake." That was the beginning of something that felt completely new and terrifying in the best way possible. We started dating, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could truly be myself with someone. Olivia didn't just accept me. She brought out the best in me. She encouraged me to pursue my interests, made me laugh when I was stressed, and showed me what it felt like to be in a healthy, supportive relationship. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Navigating a relationship while living with her brother was interesting, to say the least. Mike took it well, though. "Just don't make things weird," he said when we told him. "And for the love of God, don't break her heart." I promised I wouldn't, and I meant it. As things got more serious between us, Olivia and I started talking about the future. We took a trip together to visit her family, and I got to see her in her element, laughing with her parents, teasing Mike, and doting on her younger cousins. It was clear how much she cared about the people in her life, and it made me fall for her even more. One night, after we got back from that trip, she looked at me with a seriousness I wasn't used to. "Jake, I need to ask you something." "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Do you see a future with me? Like, a real future?" Her question caught me off guard, but the answer was easy. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I do." She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "Good. Because I do too." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And this time, I wasn't going to let anything ruin it. Life with Olivia was everything I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We'd moved in together 6 months after we started dating, and things were going great. I was finally in a relationship that felt stable, grounded, and honest. Work was going well, too, and I'd recently been promoted. To celebrate, Olivia had bought tickets to a charity dinner organized by her school. It was one of those fancy events where everyone wears suits and dresses, and I was honestly dreading it. But she was excited. So I put on my best tie and decided to make the most of it. The venue was beautiful, a massive ballroom with chandeliers that sparkled like something out of a movie. Tables were arranged in perfect symmetry, covered in white linens, and adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. A live jazz band played softly in the background as waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. Olivia looked incredible in a sleek green dress that hugged her curves and brought out the color of her eyes. I felt like the luckiest guy in the room. As the night went on, I started to relax. Olivia introduced me to her colleagues and a few parents from her school, all of whom were surprisingly down to earth. We laughed, drank, and even danced a little, though I'm pretty sure I stepped on her toes more than once. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at ease. Then it happened. We were standing near the bar, waiting for a fresh round of drinks, when I heard a voice that sent a chill down my spine. "Jake?" I turned, and there she was. Kate. At first, I didn't even recognize her. She looked so different. Her once long hair was now cut into a sleek bob, and she was dressed in a form-fitting black gown that screamed money. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. There was something in her posture, the way she carried herself, that was almost unrecognizable. She looked polished, refined, like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Next to her stood a man I immediately guessed was Trevor. He was tall and well-dressed, with the kind of effortless confidence that comes from knowing you've got the world at your feet. He extended a hand before I could even react. "You must be Jake," he said, his tone warm and friendly. "I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand out of reflex, my mind still reeling. "Hi," I managed, my voice coming out awkward and stiff. Olivia, bless her, jumped in to save me. "I'm Olivia," she said, offering her hand to both of them. "Jake's girlfriend." Kate's eyes flicked to Olivia, her expression unreadable. "It's nice to meet you," she said, her voice calm and measured. "This is Trevor. My fiancé." Fiancé. The word hit me like a punch to the gut, though I wasn't sure why. I didn't have feelings for Kate anymore, not even close. But seeing her standing there, happy and engaged to someone else, stirred something in me I couldn't quite name. The conversation that followed was one of the most awkward experiences of my life. Trevor was perfectly polite, asking me about my work and complimenting Olivia on her dress. Kate, on the other hand, seemed hesitant, like she was unsure how to navigate the situation. She kept looking at me, her gaze lingering just a little too long. After what felt like an eternity, they excused themselves to mingle with other guests. As soon as they were out of earshot, Olivia turned to me. "Well, that was interesting." "Yeah," I said, letting out a shaky breath. "Interesting." The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't stop replaying the encounter in my head, analyzing every word, every glance. Olivia noticed, of course, but she didn't push. She knew me well enough to give me space, though I could tell she was curious. It wasn't until we were driving home that she finally brought it up. "So," she said, her tone casual but probing. "That was Kate." "Yep," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "She seems different." "She is." Olivia waited for me to elaborate, but I didn't. I wasn't sure what to say. How do you explain the feeling of seeing someone who used to mean everything to you, only to realize they're a stranger now? The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. "Jake, it's Kate. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let sleeping dogs lie. But curiosity, and maybe a touch of lingering resentment, got the better of me. Finally, I replied, "What do you want?" Her response came quickly. "I just want to catch up. Please." It would mean a lot. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for coffee later that week. Olivia wasn't thrilled about it, but she trusted me enough not to make a big deal out of it. "Just be careful," she said. "She's your past for a reason." When I arrived at the cafe, Kate was already there, sitting at a corner table with a latte in front of her. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "Sure," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "What's this about?" She hesitated, fiddling with her cup. I wanted to see how you were doing. It's been a long time." "I'm doing fine," I said curtly. "How about you?" "Engaged, huh?" She nodded, her smile faltering. "Yeah, Trevor's great. He's everything I could have asked for." "Good for you," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. She flinched, like she'd been expecting me to say something else. "Jake, I know I hurt you," she said after a moment, "and I'm sorry for that. I've thought about you a lot since we broke up." "I'm over it," I said bluntly. "You don't have to apologize." "But I want to," she insisted. "I need to. What I did to you was wrong, and I hate that I let things end the way they did." Her words sounded genuine, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Whatever closure she was looking for, it wasn't something I needed anymore. "Kate, I appreciate the apology, but I've moved on. I'm happy now. You should be too." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes searching mine for something I couldn't give her. Finally, she nodded. "I'm glad you're happy, Jake. You deserve that." With that, I stood up, leaving her and the past behind. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I realized Kate no longer had any power over me. She was just another person from my past, and I was finally free to focus on the future. With Olivia, it had been a few months since I'd run into Kate at the charity dinner. After our brief coffee meeting, I thought things were settled. I'd made it clear that I had no interest in rekindling any kind of relationship, friendship, or otherwise, and I walked away from that cafe feeling like I'd finally closed the door on that chapter of my life. Olivia and I were stronger than ever, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly in control of my own happiness. But then, the messages started. At first, they were subtle. I'd occasionally get a text from an unknown number. Nothing overt, just a simple, "Hi, Jake. Hope you're doing well." Or, "Thinking about you today. Hope all is good." I ignored them, assuming they were harmless but annoying attempts by Kate to test the waters. When she didn't get a response, I figured she'd give up. But I was wrong. One night, Mike knocked on my door, holding his phone in his hand and looking both confused and annoyed. "Hey man, can we talk for a second?" "Sure," I said, putting down the book I'd been reading. "What's up?" He stepped into my room, shutting the door behind him. "Kate's been messaging me. A lot." I frowned. "Messaging you about what?" "You." He handed me his phone, scrolling through a series of texts from Kate. Most of them were vague, asking how I was doing or if Mike could pass along a message. But a few were more desperate, practically begging him to convince me to talk to her. "I didn't want to get involved," Mike said, running a hand through his hair. "But she's been relentless. I told her it's not my place to meddle, but she won't let it go." I sighed, handing the phone back to him. "I'm sorry she's dragging you into this. I'll handle it." Mike nodded. "Thanks, man. I don't want to stir up drama, but I thought you should know." That night, I sent Kate a single message. "Stop contacting my friends and family. This is inappropriate, and it needs to end." I didn't get a response, and for a while, things were quiet. I thought that was the end of it. But a few weeks later, I noticed something strange. My work email, which I rarely used for personal matters, had several messages from an unfamiliar address. At first, I assumed it was spam, but then I opened one, and my heart sank. "Hi, Jake. I know you said you don't want to talk, but I feel like I owe you an explanation. Please, just hear me out. Kate." I didn't reply. I marked it as spam and moved on, hoping she'd take the hint. But the messages kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. She apologized for what had happened in the past, tried to explain her actions, and even hinted at problems in her engagement with Trevor. I deleted them all without reading more than the first few lines. I was determined not to let her drag me back into her orbit. Things escalated when Olivia found out. I'd been careful not to mention Kate's attempts to contact me, not wanting to worry Olivia or make her feel insecure. But one day, she saw one of the emails while we were watching a movie on my laptop. I'd forgotten to close my email tab, and the subject line, "Asterisk please, just one more chance to explain," asterisk caught her eye. "Jake, what's this?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with concern. I froze, realizing there was no way to downplay it. "It's Kate. She's been trying to contact me." "For how long?" "A couple of weeks," I admitted. "Maybe longer. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to stress you out," I said. "It's nothing. I haven't responded to any of her messages." Olivia sighed, crossing her arms. "I get that you didn't want to upset me, but we're supposed to be a team. You should have told me." "I'm sorry," I said, taking her hand. "You're right. I should have. But I promise you, I have no interest in her. She's in the past." Olivia nodded, her expression softening. "Okay, but if she keeps this up, you need to do something about it." I agreed, though I wasn't sure what something meant. Kate's attempts to reach me felt harmless, if annoying. But as the weeks went on, her persistence started to wear on me. She created new email accounts whenever I blocked her, and I even started getting handwritten letters in the mail. I never gave her my new address, which meant she'd gone out of her way to find it. That realization sent a shiver down my spine. One letter in particular stood out. It was longer than the others, written in her neat, familiar handwriting. She poured her heart out, recounting our relationship in painstaking detail and apologizing for everything she'd done wrong. Near the end, she wrote something that made my blood run cold. "I know we're meant to be together, Jake. I can feel it. Please don't let Olivia come between us." I showed the letter to Olivia, who was understandably furious. "This is insane," she said, pacing the living room. "You need to shut this down." "I know," I said, feeling a knot of guilt in my stomach. "I just don't know how. Have you thought about a restraining order?" The idea felt extreme, but as I reread the letter, I started to wonder if Olivia was right. Kate's behavior wasn't just persistent, it was obsessive. I decided to consult a lawyer, who confirmed that her actions could qualify as harassment. He advised me to keep a record of every message, letter, and unwanted contact, just in case things escalated further. Meanwhile, Kate's attempts to reach me continued. She even started messaging Mike again, despite my earlier warning. At one point, she showed up at the apartment while I was at work, leaving a gift basket on the doorstep with a note that read, "For old time's sake." Mike texted me a photo of it, his message dripping with sarcasm. "Looks like your ex is stepping up her game." I was fed up. I drafted a firm email to Kate, making it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and that I would take legal action if it didn't stop. I sent it off with a mix of relief and dread, hoping it would finally put an end to everything. For a while, it worked. The emails stopped, the letters stopped, and I didn't hear anything from her or about her. Olivia and I started to relax, thinking the worst was behind us. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over.